And welcome on to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with you, along with Zach Malamud. And Zach, we're back in a different setting here.
Yeah, it's Thanksgiving time, Brett. Happy to be home, home for the week. And a lot of great football this Thursday. I'm excited for it.
Excited that we actually get to watch the games together, something that I really don't get to do that often. And so that should be pretty exciting to be able to do, at least for once.
Definitely.
All right, so let's get right into it with some of the breaking news that we have coming into it. But before that, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, and give it a thumbs up. Also, our comments are open tonight. We are live on the late night window, so the late night crowd, get your questions in, waivers, trades. I know that the ESPN standard trade deadline is not for another week about. So there are trade questions, lineup questions, all of that. So make sure that you get your comments in. We can get to as many questions as we can. Let's start out with the Atlanta Falcons, as Desmond Ridder named the starter, at least for the rest of the way, according to head coach Arthur Smith. Zach, Taylor Heineke didn't really give too much for the Atlanta Falcons. And so now what does this exactly do to the values of the Kyle Pitts and the Drake Londons and even the Bijan Robinsons?
Brett, I think it sets it back to kind of where it was before. And as much as I hate that as a Bijan Robinson owner, that's just kind of the story. I think when I had Heineke in there, is more of a passing approach rather than a running approach, and focusing really a lot on that passing game. They did that with Ridder, but I think Ridder showed his mobility as well, rather than Heineke, who settled a lot of his time in the passing game. So I feel like it takes a little bit of the run game away once again when it comes to Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, but I think the passing game will kind of be better off, because I feel like Heineke just struggled to get things going with this offense. It just was not great. They were losing games, and obviously they made the switch back to Ridder. I think in the end, probably the right one for Atlanta.
Yeah, so Heineke goes down with a hamstring injury, and so they have to bring in Desmond Ridder. And listen, he was okay. It wasn't that bad. But still, he has struggled at times. 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in the 10 games that he's played. And so there's been accuracy issues. That's been a thing that's been going on pretty much the whole season with him. And then it came down to, with Heineke, it was going to be a little more pass heavy. And we didn't exactly see that. It wasn't like an overloading passing offense with Taylor Heineke. But now Ridder comes back in. I think that it's, the values aren't changing that much. I don't think that Kyle Pitts owners are excited that Ridder was there, or were more excited when Heineke was there. I think it's, it's pretty similar. I'm expecting Atlanta to go out and get either a veteran quarterback or go draft one, just because I think that that's their biggest issue right now. They have playmakers all over the field on both sides of the ball. And so the quarterback is going to be a thing moving forward as they continue to build forward with their team. I don't know that it really changes the Kyle Pitts value, the Drake London value, the Bijan Robinson value. I think they're pretty much status quo.
That's fair. I think, like I said, I think it just takes a little bit of the run game away, just because of the mobility of Ridder. He likes to get out of the pocket. He can run. Obviously, he's had fumbling problems when he does get out of the pocket, so that's something that he needs to clean up. But I think overall, probably the best decision for them. And I agree with you. So, like, drafting a quarterback is probably priority number one for Atlanta once they get into this offseason.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on the Atlanta Falcons, especially from a dynasty standpoint, where they've got a ton of different tools and a ton of different playmakers.
Definitely.
All right, so we jump into our next update here, and it is Cooper Kupp. He left the game early in the Seahawks game, and then comes out that he has a low ankle sprain, much better than a high ankle sprain that kept him out probably the rest of the season. Instead, he has a low ankle sprain, and that's good because it just means he's going to be day to day for now, and we'll see what happens. I mean, going forward, though, does this really do anything except for boost Puka Nacua if Cooper Kupp can't go?
I mean, it probably boosts Puka. I think looking at it, Kyron Williams probably will be back, so they could focus a little bit on that run game. That has been successful when Williams has gone in there. Hasn't been great since Darrell Henderson took over, and they had Royce Freeman as well, and Darrell Henderson ends up getting waived, which came as a bit of a surprise earlier today or yesterday. And then, I mean, looking at Cooper Kupp, though, it's just been one of those years, and the injury bug just continues to crawl in the NFL. I feel like there's more injuries than ever in the NFL this year. It's just, I feel like it's just one of those years where a lot of big players, big time players, just have gone down with injuries, and day to day for Cooper Kupp, I think it does boost the value of Puka Nacua, but I feel like just Cooper Kupp overall, if you're an owner, deadlines are probably gone, but the value is pretty low right now. I mean, he's just been disappointing, hasn't really gotten going, and I think a lot of that has to do with the injury problem, something he'll probably hope for better for next year. I feel like, Brett, when we talk about it in terms of dynasty, there's going to be a lot of people that want Cooper Kupp. I don't know if the value is there right now to give up a guy like him, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the value right now is probably lower than we've seen it in a long time. I mean, we were just talking a few weeks ago about a trade that went down in our league from a dynasty standpoint where Cooper Kupp got moved and the value that was returned was pretty high. And so I don't know that that's anywhere near it right now, just based on the injury struggles. And then, yeah, there's going to be people that are going to come in and try to buy him low based on the age, based on the emergence of Puka Nacua. Yeah, I'm not selling him right now low. And certainly I think from a redraft standpoint, well, like I said, there's about a week or so, I believe it's next Wednesday or next Thursday, is the trade deadline for ESPN leagues. I think it's next Wednesday. But you're not going out and getting a Cooper Kupp because you don't know what, they say low ankle sprain and day-to-day and all that, but we don't know what that actually means in terms of an output on the field. Whether or not they ease him back in, things like that. Sort of been the ring thing for him this season. So I'm kind of taking the season off on the redraft standpoint on Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
And I think just, as far as the value goes elsewhere, Puka Nacua, if Cooper Kupp can't go, he's a wide receiver 1. If not, he's in there. He's a wide receiver 2 that has the potential of a wide receiver 1 based on just the volume alone. As far as a possible addition, I mean, Atwell, I think is a guy that's out there in 75% of leagues right now. Had 2 top 15 finishes early in the season when Cooper Kupp's not there. Had a lot of the target share also, double-digit targets in both of those. And so, listen, he didn't get into the end zone in a couple of those weeks, and he still finished as a top 15 receiver. So I think that is a potential add, especially if Cooper Kupp can't come back or does, lingering injury and they ease him back in. Tutu Atwell could be a guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tutu probably maybe a streamer this week because they do have a pretty solid matchup against Arizona. So that should be interesting. I would put him on the radar for longer term, probably the rest of the season. Probably not. I think Cooper Kupp may come back. Still obviously a question mark just because of the Rams. They've been losing, they've been winning. It's just kind of been on and off. So definitely something to keep an eye on in the next couple of weeks.
All right, so let's jump right into our next story here. Aaron Jones gets an MRI today, sprained MCL. He's unlikely to play this week. Zach, I mean, going forward, this is an interesting situation in Green Bay. Obviously, they're at the gates for Jordan Love, calling for his head, the Packer fans. And then you got now Aaron Jones is hurt. Emmanuel Wilson got hurt in the middle of the game, so it sort of was just AJ Dillon. He didn't really do much though. 14 carries, only had 29 yards. Caught four targets for 32 yards, which was nice to see. But could we really trust AJ Dillon if he's the sole guy in the backfield?
I don't think we can, Brett. And I think this Packers offense, I've basically given up on them. There's a lot there. Yes, like a ton of talent. And it seems that the only two people that have actually, and yeah, maybe Luke Musgrave, I'll add him in there, but the only two guys that I feel like have just been like, okay, yeah, they're solid. Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. And that's pretty much it. I think those two guys have scored touchdowns. They've got receptions. They got volume. Like, all of that, and the rest of the Green Bay offense, the big hitters, and Watson, even though he had a touchdown last week, Watson, Aaron Jones, just not really nothing. Like, and disappointing draft picks in the end. I'm very disappointed on the Aaron Jones front. A 4th round pick, 3rd round pick that you're expecting could end up having the upside of a 1st round pick. And just a disappointing season for Aaron Jones. Obviously, injuries came into play, really affected him. And it just turns out really poorly for Aaron Jones owners. There's really not much you can do about it. I would say in terms of dynasty, he's getting up there in age. The cliff is maybe coming soon. So it may be time to look other ways because they do also have A.J. Dillon in that backfield. And in real football talk, like, yeah, it could be that time pretty soon where AJ Dillon starts to take over and become that lead guy. I don't know how quickly that's coming, but if Jones keeps getting injured, I mean, I feel like it could be coming soon, Brett.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing here is where the Packers end up picking in the draft, and that going forward. From a redraft standpoint, yeah, obviously if Aaron Jones is hurt, and we'll see where it goes moving forward, but there's the potential that there's another quarterback there next season that's not named Jordan Love, and I think that shapes the way that the offense is going to go. Do you then keep Aaron Jones under behind him to almost basically be the safety valve there, and that's the way they go. I'm curious what happens there. As far as it goes for this season, yeah, like you said, you can't really trust anybody. I was going to say Luke Musgrave, but earlier today, actually, LaFleur said that he has a pretty significant abdomen injury. It came out that he lacerated his kidney, played through it, caught the ball on the play, played the rest of the game, came in, told the doctor the next day, and ended up spending the night in the hospital. But he's a tough playmaker, and he's going to be a dynamic playmaker for us. He didn't say anything all game. So, we're going to see whether or not Luke Musgrave gets placed on IR. A scary situation, obviously, and hope that he gets back soon. But as far as the way that the offense goes, I think that Luke Musgrave seemed to be the only consistent pass catcher out there for Green Bay.
I would say consistency-wise, yes, I agree with you. When it came to fantasy points and just some big games, whenever they came, where I think Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs just have been pretty solid. Reed more than Dobbs recently. I feel like Reed is kind of pleaded his case as the number one in this offense, which you told me that at the start of the season. And what in the world? Just a rookie coming in, and you got two really good players in Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson, and then Reed comes out as maybe the number one after this year, Brett.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I think that Reed could end up as this number one guy, especially with the inconsistency that we saw with Watson. But again, it all comes down to who they pick in the draft, or if they keep Jordan Love under center. I'm obviously we'll be monitoring it as the offseason goes, but I think that that's sort of the looming question mark over Lambeau Field right now.
Yep, agreed, Brett.
All right, so let's jump right into our standouts, and we got to start with Calvin Ridley, who finally comes through with a huge performance. He got 7 catches for 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 9 targets in this game, Zach. He also added 18 yards on the ground to finish with 31.1 standard PPR points. Let's just break this down. Ridley's not had a good season thus far. Again, you and I play in these leagues where Ridley seemed to be offered up by multiple owners across the board. He kind of jumped back into wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 even territory now with, this big performance here.
Yeah, he did, Brett. It's great news for me. I traded for Calvin Ridley a couple weeks ago. Just kind of a plan towards next year. And maybe anything that he could give me this year, and he gave a really, really good week. I think this all came down to the matchup, Brett. I think it was a really, really great matchup for him. And it was his time to really step up. I don't know if he's going to be as consistent with that as we go on in the next couple of weeks, but obviously this is huge for Calvin Ridley in the future. But I mean, you look at his next couple games in his schedule. You got Texans, Bengals, Browns, and Ravens. Those are 4 of the toughest passing defenses in the NFL. So it's not going to be straightforward here. I think this is a good sign heading into next year. Probably back to that wide receiver 2 range. Once you think about it in terms of dynasty, I don't know how highly I can rate him for the rest of the season, but of course, like a great game for him overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is more so for the dynasty crowd that they get excited over this because, yeah, listen, I'm not sure so much about throwing Calvin Ridley into my lineup as we head into this late stretch in the season. You're kind of praying that your guys go off so that you can either secure a playoff spot, get a bye week, things like that. Obviously, when you hit the playoffs, if your guys don't go off, well, then you're out and your season's over. And so I think that especially at this time of the season, you want to put your most consistent guys out there that are going to get you points every single week. Calvin Ridley has not been that guy, unfortunately, this year. Yeah, great output. And if you had him in your flex and, bye weeks coming up, obviously, like you can fill him in there. But otherwise, it's been a rough season for Calvin Ridley. But as far as the dynasty crowd goes, yeah, you got to be excited because like you bought him low. And I think that, there were people out there who also went out and bought him low this was a guy who was competing with Julio Jones for targets in Atlanta. And it looked like, oh, wow, this guy's going to be just as good, if not better. Just some of the catches he was making in Atlanta. And so obviously now new setting in Jacksonville, nice young quarterback who looks like he's going to be the answer there for a long time. And so filling that chemistry in, I think that's important, and we're starting to see that come forward.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And I mean, the one thing I'd say is like if there's a little bit of optimism with Ridley, I mean, the last 2 games probably of your season, they're week 16 and week 17. He's got some favorable matchups. He goes up against Tampa Bay and Carolina. So I mean, if you make it far enough and you're like, all right, well, I need a guy in my flex spot, and yeah, he hasn't been consistent, but take a shot on him. Could end up being like a league winner in the last 2 weeks, Brett. Crazy to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, especially when it comes to it with the flex position, I think that's where his best fit is, because if you're getting to the championship game, it's probably not because Calvin Ridley got you there. It's probably because you have a couple other guys who got you there. And so, yeah, I agree that with those couple options there, with those couple matchups there, rather, I think it's a good option for a potential flex guy.
Agree with you.
All right, so we jump into our next standout here, and it's Saquon Barkley, who came through in the clutch for the New York Giants against the Washington Commanders as they take a 31-19 win, 14 carries for 83 yards. He had 4 catches for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns, finishing with an even 30 PPR standard points. Zach, listen, this Giants team has been just down. I can't even say up and down. It's just been down for the bulk of the season outside of that miraculous comeback against the Arizona Cardinals really early in the season. Finally, they get Washington here, and they get a pretty good, solid performance. It's granted, it came against the Washington Commanders, so you have to temper your expectation. But listen, they were okay. Like even Tommy DeVito was great. Like Saquon, though, as far as his performance goes, wasn't amazing on the ground. But I think that the thing that really shined through was that he was able to catch the ball from Tommy DeVito, and that might actually start to be a thing a bit where he had 5 targets in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, kind of caught you by surprise of Saquon getting catches from Tommy DeVito. Because I mean, Tommy DeVito even throwing the ball pretty well. It's still just it was kind of crazy to see. If I'm being honest, like we haven't seen it from Tommy DeVito just yet. And then he really got going in this one. So that's huge for the Giants overall. Just looking at the rest of the season, they're going to keep Tommy DeVito in it, and they're going to keep trying to win games. Like that's the motivation in the NFL right now. They do have some good matchups, I would say. They're at home for a couple of them, so that should be interesting. But I mean, looking at it right now, that's a good sign for Saquon Barkley, because I mean, for fantasy owners of Saquon, you're hoping for anything, and you're also hoping that like he's the lead guy in this offense to really get this team going, and get a lot of fantasy points. So a huge week for him, and like I said, some matchups that he could be looking forward to in the next couple of weeks. That's huge right now.
Yeah, I think that other than the 2 Dallas games, Saquon's been pretty solid this year. I mean, yeah, he missed those couple games there right in the season, but he's had double-digit fantasy points in every single week. You know, the two games that I referenced, the one against Arizona where they had comeback, and now this one were his 2 biggest. He scores over 25 standard PPR points. And so, yeah, those games will come. Saquon is obviously a guy that you picked high in your draft this year. We both weren't huge believers in him, but I think that for the owner that was a big believer in him, this is a little bit of satisfaction, and hopefully they were able to grab some other guys as well. And now, obviously, as you head into these important matchups, hope that Saquon can get it done as well, and add to your grand total of scores for the end of the week.
Yeah, agreed, Brett.
All right, so we have to jump next to George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk, both of them coming clutch. One second here. Let me get my stat up. And as Brandon Ayuk, 5 catches, 153 yards, a touchdown. He had 6 targets. George Kittle, though, I think that was pretty crazy. He had 9 targets in this game and 89 yards, a touchdown. He had 8 catches, and so both of them finishing with over 20 points. Kittle, 22.9 standard PPR points. Ayuk, 26.6 standard PPR points. And Zach, I mean, listen, they were playing Tampa Bay. So, again, it was one of those matchups that we thought that they would be pretty good, and they turned out to be. But this entire offense just seems to be rolling every single week. We really know who it's going to be. This week, it was kind of everybody.
Yeah, I mean, all fantasy owners, this is the kind of weeks that you're always praying for. It's not just one guy; it's almost every guy. So that's huge. Just for San Fran owners in general. Obviously, it also continues to put like our minds on the radar of Tampa Bay. And if you're going up against Tampa Bay, yeah, you might have a good week, no matter who you are. So that's huge for these guys. And I mean, Kittle, it's massive because obviously all the question marks going throughout this season, and just has not been consistency wise where fantasy owners really want him to be. I mean, how about 8 receptions on 9 targets? Like that's perfect for a tight end plus a touchdown. Like you can't picture it any other way. And then for Ayuk, he's in that wide receiver 2 range, but in this offense, he could be even higher than that because Purdy has been just so electric this year that it's boosted Ayuk's value tremendously as well. I feel like a lot of the past years when it came to the quarterback who was always playing for San Fran, it lowered those guys' values a tiny bit. Just based on the deep ball wasn't always there, Brett. That's something that they kind of struggled with always. And just consistency, getting it to your targets and your pass catchers. More so, you're just relying on the run game. So they've shown that they can do all kinds of things in this offense. Purdy is the guy, 100%. And they can sling it around, they can run it, they could beat you every which way. So that's, like I said, very, very big week and huge for the confidence of San Francisco 49er owners.
Yeah, I mean, I have Ayuk on one of my teams. I actually have Christian McCaffrey's on that team as well. Brock Purdy's my backup quarterback. He was out on waivers early this year. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy about all three of those guys. Just the output, just based on the fact that, listen, when it came to Brandon Ayuk, it was like the expectations were he could finish his highest as a wide receiver 2 mid-range guy, and it's far exceeded that. I think that this is definitely the coming out party for Brandon Ayuk. He's been a wide receiver 1 pretty much every single week in his finishes, and so another good one here. I'm looking for it to just quite honestly continue. And George Kittle, yeah, I mean, 9 targets in the game. I think that that's the most important of the stats. It's only the second time that or third time he's had that output this season. And yeah, he's had some pretty big games. This is now the third game in a row where he's scored over 20 standard PPR points. And so, yeah, you got Seattle, Philly, Seattle, Arizona coming up. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a rough stretch here with the linebackers, but I think that Kittle has proven that he's sort of matchup proof. You're not really even thinking about benching him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, there's not many tight ends that you can say, oh, he's going to get 9 targets. So that tells you kind of all you need to know. You have to start George Kittle. You really do.
Yeah, completely. So let's jump right into our game previews here. As we have 3 Thanksgiving games here. Excited to watch 3 games of football right in a row. The 12:30, the 4:30, the 8:20. We start at the 12:30 in Detroit as the Lions host the Packers. Zach, first off, this should be a pretty interesting one just from a football standpoint, because it seems that the tides are turning and the Lions right now are just kind of having everyone's number, including the Packers, which has not been the case for a long time. I mean, let's talk about the Lions here. As far as it goes with the running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, you got her both again, right?
Of course. I mean, you're definitely starting both of them because even though they're really not splitting. Like it's interesting, Brett, because Montgomery's getting the carries. He had 12 for 76, but he also got the touchdown last week as well. Gibbs got a touchdown himself last week, which I think we heard after the game that Montgomery actually gave that one to him. Said, yeah, Jahmyr, go get that one. So that's great to see, Brett. Very good for the confidence of maybe both players, because you know that Montgomery's going to get his points, and he's not going to just give them up always, but once in a while, all right, yeah, Jahmyr, go get your touchdown there. That's huge because I feel like in the running game, you're still expecting Montgomery to have that workload, and he has. So that's huge. In the passing game, you're loving what you're seeing from Jahmyr Gibbs right now. 6 receptions, 6 targets, 59 yards. Perfect. He's getting the targets out of the backfield. Montgomery had 2 receptions on 2 targets. So, I mean, that's kind of what we expected at the start of the year, Brett. Montgomery gets the run, Gibbs gets the pass. I mean, it's kind of just evening out, and they're both finishing in the top 15. So, I mean, that's everything you could have wanted right now.
Yeah, completely. I think that as far as it goes with dynasty perspective, like, you're excited if you own both of these guys, because this isn't the only year. Obviously, Gibbs is a rookie. He's going to be there for a while, but David Montgomery's on a multi-year deal as well. So I think this is going to be something that continues even through next season, if not the year after that, if they sign David Montgomery to another deal. These two guys really feed off of each other. They really like working together. The camaraderie, you see it. You just mentioned it, like Dave Montgomery saying, "Hey, Jameer, go get this one," and put him out there to go get a touchdown. And so I think it's really good, this partnership, and it's going to continue. So yeah, I think you have to start both of them there. As far as the receiving game goes, it's pretty simple. You're starting Amon-Ra. Guy I'm looking at right now, Jameson Williams. I mean, listen, in Dynasty, I was able to make a trade where I flipped Jameson Williams away. I'm a believer in Jameson Williams. I think that he really hasn't gotten his opportunity. Only 7 games in the NFL combined in this now 3rd year. Obviously, he had a torn ACL coming into the league here, into his rookie year. Then obviously the suspension comes into this year, and so he didn't have an NFL training camp in either year, and so I think that at least from the standpoint of his future, we're starting to see that a bit more. He's getting the counts go up and up and up and up, gets rewarded with a touchdown. Not sure he's going to have that much of an impact for the rest of this year, but don't be surprised if starting later on in the season, he starts to get more of that target share. He's only rostered in 14% of leagues, though, so he is out there in a significant way. So definitely got to keep an eye on as the next few weeks go, and we'll see if the snap count can match the targets.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. Just kind of a guy that's still getting into this offense. Of course, the suspension, and then just it's still taking a little bit of time for him. But I mean, stash him right now. Stash him if he goes on maybe a burst in playoff time, and all of a sudden you got a really maybe solid flex play, or a low end flex just to take a shot on. So definitely roster him. It's been a rough couple of weeks, Brett, for Sam Laporta. Just has not gotten the same amount of target share. I think that's due to they've just focused on the running game, number one. Also had a couple of tough matchups. And then the third part is you got a wide receiver 1 in the NFL in Amon-Ra St. Brown. So has not been easy. I still think obviously you're still starting him. He had 3 receptions on 5 targets, which will say what you want. 5 targets for a tight end is not bad. That's not bad. Obviously, it could be higher, but in an offense with so many weapons, it's not bad. You want a little bit more. And I think like touchdowns are the biggest thing, which usually is what you're asking for tight ends.
Yeah, I agree. I think that teams are starting to pay attention to Sam Laporta, obviously guarding him a little tighter than they would have in weeks 1, 2, or 3. And so, yeah, we're starting to see that challenge, and excited to see how he overcomes it. As far as the Packers go, listen, last week they played against the Chargers, and it was sort of about spreading the ball around to the different receivers. Jaden Reed, Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, all had 4, 5, 6 targets in this game. And so, I don't know that you can necessarily say you have to start one guy. But Jaden Reed's out there in a ton of leagues right now. He's only rostered in 18.7% of leagues on Yahoo or on ESPN rather. So go out and add him. I mean, he seems to be the number 1 option just based on the not only the amount of targets, but the quality of targets, where he's throwing him the ball. Jordan Love seems to be looking at Jaden Reed as they start to get down the field towards the red zone. And so I think it's going to result in some touchdowns. And yeah, he had a rushing touchdown this past week, which boosted his numbers. But I think Reed's going to be an option going forward here.
Yeah, Brett, I actually think Jaden Reed's a flex option right now. Back-to-back weeks with 14 plus fantasy points, a touchdown in each of those games. I mean, you get a rushing touchdown as a wide receiver. You're running 32 yards down the field. They got to play for you. So he's very involved in this offense. He had 5 targets the week before and then 6 targets this past week. That's huge, and I think they're going to keep rolling with him, especially with now Aaron Jones going down. they're not going to want to rely on this running game against Detroit. They'll probably be down in the game. So I think he's a flex play. I think he's going to get targets, and why not? If he puts up 10, 12, 13 fantasy points for you, then that's a solid output for a game. And I, like I said, they're going to be down in this one. They're going to need to throw the ball.
Yeah, and like I said, he did have a couple rushing options there. So, a bit of a gadget player. I think we're starting to see that a bit as well. Really can't trust anybody else. Obviously, we said Aaron Jones, unlikely to play. Musgrave was in the hospital. Don't think he's going to get out there to play and potentially go on IR. And so, yeah, I think he's the only one you can really trust. Obviously, Christian Watson's all banged up. Dobbs hasn't been amazing. So I think I agree with you. He's a flex option, but I'm kind of staying away from everyone else.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the thing about AJ Dillon is obviously he's gonna be the lead back. He's a low end flex, and you're praying that he just drops into the end zone. And I feel like that's really all you could hope for in this one. So I agree with you on Green Bay.
Yeah, I agree on the drop into the end zone. I think that's the only real value because we haven't seen much of any sort of efficiency when it comes to AJ Dillon.
Definitely.
Jumping into the second of our games here on Thanksgiving, Washington at Dallas in Jerry World. We start first the Washington Commanders, who, yes, they took the loss last week to the New York Giants, 31-19. Brian Robinson seems to be having a pretty good season, though, Zach. 17 carries, 73 yards, didn't get a touchdown, but he did get 7 catches for 58 yards, which I think really helps to boost the value forward. It kind of is what they were talking about, what they wanted to see out of Gibson when he first came into the league, and they're seeing it out of Brian Robinson right now. And so I think obviously we're talking about Brian Robinson, standalone number one guy there on his team right now, and he beat out Antonio Gibson for the job. But I think we're talking, probably running back 2 numbers even with this output.
Yeah, Brett, should be like an interesting one because they're going up against Dallas, and you'd probably expect them to be down in this game at Dallas. I think looking at it, yeah, Robinson's going to continue to be the lead guy and probably going to continue to get those receptions out of the backfield, which is huge for his value. Turns him into a maybe a high-end RB2. Like if he continues to get those receptions and is consistent with that, because this offense, yeah, there's the wide receivers and there's the talent there. But I feel like a lot of the time it just rolls through Brian Robinson and what he can do out of the backfield, whether that's the receptions or the rushing value. I mean, for Washington, it's a tough matchup. Obviously, you're going to probably start McLaurin. But, I mean, after that, Dotson has been okay. He's been on and off, kind of a boomer bust in this one, just because of the tough matchup. Logan Thomas could be an option. I expect them to be down, so they might have to throw. And Logan Thomas has been one of Sam Howell's top options, one of his favorite options, so he could be on the radar. But I feel like that's probably it for Washington for me.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. The only thing I'll add, I think Sam Howell is probably fringe quarterback 1 if you are in a bit of a tight one, but he's probably more of a super flex option for me, I would say. And solid floor at that, even against Dallas. I think that the rushing ability from Sam Howell, he's proven that he can take off if he needs to. He might have to do it a little more in this game with that scary defense he's going against.
Yeah, definitely, Brett. I mean, for Dallas, it's probably start everybody, just because of what you saw the Giants do to this defense last week. And the defense, it was weird because the defense didn't play bad. They had 5 sacks on the day. Like they had a solid day. They just gave up way too many big plays. So that's not a good recipe going into Dallas. Of course, CD didn't have his greatest game last week, and we've been accustomed to unbelievable CD Lamb games in the last couple of weeks at least. Only 6 receptions on 9 targets, 38 yards. did end up getting in the end zone, and that probably ended up saving his day. But I think this one is a really solid matchup that he's going to be staring at. And for Dallas, of course, Tony Pollard, finally, thank the Lord, he got into the end zone again. So I think the value might be somewhat back, but I'm not as optimistic just yet. I need to see it in more than just 1 week. But if you're a Tony Pollard owner, you were like me and just thanking so many people for making this day happen. That he finally got in the end zone again. I think I think the other guy would probably be Jake Ferguson that I would put there. Of course, you could start Dak, just because, like I said, you saw Tommy DeVito beating up on this defense last week. That's not a great recipe heading into Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Dak just absolutely, go off these last couple weeks, and we spoke a lot about it last week. And go check out that episode if you want your long-term dynasty output on Dak and the outlook that we have for him. But yeah, you probably can start him this week because just based on of what it was last week for this defense, it struggled against Tommy DeVito. I think they're going to struggle again. I agree on all fronts. Agree with Jake Ferguson as well. Obviously, Schumacher, he ended up getting the touchdown last week, but you're avoiding him. You're going to put Ferguson in there just based on volume. And I would just add Brandon Cooks to the list of potential flex options because I think this could be a game where Washington tries to overcommit to CeeDee Lamb. And we obviously saw a few weeks ago what happens when you overcommit to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb still goes off, and now you leave Brandon Cooks wide open.
Yeah, that's fair, Brett. I think we could end up seeing this one. It might be the furthest margin between each other on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, I think that's going to end up being the biggest of the blowouts. So, the biggest margin, I agree. This could be a real blowout. Let's jump into our final game, though, of Thanksgiving. It is the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. Zach, we just spoke about San Francisco, so I'm just going to say start your guys. As far as Seattle goes, it's pretty interesting. They head into this game coming off of a loss to the Los Angeles Rams 17-16. And, you're kind of starting your regular guys here. You're going to start Lockett. You're going to start Metcalf. Gene's probably a super flex option for me still. But the big story here is that Kenneth Walker goes down in the first quarter. Zach Charbonnet comes in. Not an amazing output. 15 carries, though, 47 yards. He did get 6 catches, 22 yards, though, over the air. And so, Zach, I mean, obviously we're hearing all the, Charbonnet being the top option as far as it goes on waivers. Is this going to be a repeat of, just a few seasons ago when we saw Kenneth Walker being that guy off waivers from the Rashad Penny injury, and all of a sudden, like, Kenneth Walker went off? Are we expecting that sort of thing here from Charbonnet, even in a tough matchup?
I'm not expecting a crazy jump from Charbonnet. I'm not, because of the matchup. I think it's going to be limited a little bit. I also think that even though it's in Seattle, I think San Fran's offense has been rolling. And that's kind of the opposite of what Seattle's defense has been. Yes, they played well last week against LA, but this offense, I don't know if who's stopping this offense of San Francisco if on this rate that they're on this track, especially after last week. There's not many teams that could stop them. And I'm definitely not picking Seattle's defense, who's been kind of on and off to end up being the team to do that. I think in this game, it'll end up coming down to just Seattle and can they throw the ball and can they kind of keep up? I think Charbonnet can get a lot of receptions out of the backfield. That's something I think we'll end up seeing, because I'm expecting him to be the every down back. I do end up thinking that, yes, they could get DJ Dallas involved. Like, I don't think that's going to end up being a thing. I think it's going to be up to Charbonnet and what he's able to do. Not expecting a huge game this week, though, Brett, because of the team they're going up against.
Yeah, it's fair. Listen, I am a Charbonnet owner as far as it goes in Dynasty as well as redraft, because I used him as my handcuff Something we spoke about that was very important heading into the season was grabbing making sure that you protect your lineup with the handcuff. So obviously Walker goes down. Now I can fill Charbonnet right in there. Yes, tough matchup. I agree. I will point to last week, though. Rachaad White actually played pretty well against the San Francisco defense. I'm curious if they kind of look at that Seattle and say, okay, we want you to do this and run the same way and, catch out of the air. And that same kind of production that Rachaad White had fell into the end zone. And so, I think that Charbonnet, listen, as far as Charbonnet goes, he's a really explosive runner. He will run through a guy. And that we've seen that pretty much the entire season. His snap counts have gone up and up and up. He out-snapped Kenneth Walker the last couple weeks before the injury. Now, obviously, he becomes the number one lead guy. I'm expecting a big workload, not expecting an amazing output. I'll put it he'll score somewhere between 15 and 20 fantasy points, I would guess, just based on the workload alone. Obviously, if he falls into the end zone, it becomes a bit more.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, that's fair. I think it's going to come down to the volume plus what he's able to do if he's able to get in the end zone. I think the receptions are going to be huge out of the backfield, especially in an offense where there are a lot of weapons. So Gino's going to be slinging it around. He's going to kind of have to keep up with this San Fran team. So I think when I would look at Seattle overall, just you're kind of starting your guys in this one. Of course, the big one now, take out Walker and just replace him with Charbonnet.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing is just to compare the two of Walker and Charbonnet. Charbonnet does catch the ball out of the backfield where you really don't see that from Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's really just get the ball in his hands and run the ball. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the Seattle offense kind of attacks from the run, but also from the running back through the air.
Yep, definitely going to be interesting, Brett.
All right, so we jump to the first Black Friday matchup in the history of the NFL. It comes at MetLife Stadium in what should be an absolute barn burner as the New York Jets host the Miami Dolphins. Zach, I mean, we could talk about the Jets all day long, but let's just briefly go into it here. Zach Wilson gets benched. Tim Boyle is in. Does that mean that we are benching a guy like a Garrett Wilson or flex optioning him? Obviously you're gonna play Breece Hall, but are you nervous to start Garrett Wilson this week? Is really what my question comes to a Garrett Wilson owner.
So as a Garrett Wilson owner, I'll keep it very simple. Yes, I'm very nervous. I'd probably say just look at your options. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm not going to personally be benching him. I have him in a dynasty league. I'm just you got to start a lot of guys. So of course, like Garrett Wilson's going to obviously be in my lineup. But for people in just like standard, like 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, flex, like look at your options because you might have a better one than what Garrett Wilson could give you with Tim Boyle as his quarterback. That's just the reality of the situation. Plus, I mean, just look at the matchup. Like, this is not an easy matchup. I understand, like, okay, well, he's the top weapon, and Devontae did well against them last week. I think there's no comparison right now between those two guys, Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Devontae is just making something out of nothing. Garrett has been struggling nonstop throughout the last couple of weeks and beyond. Like, it's not a great spot right now. I'm going to end up staying away. That's probably going to be my advice just because of this. The matchup's not great. Plus the quarterback, I'm not going near it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's a bit of a scary world if you have Garrett Wilson. And, we spoke about how the last few weeks he's actually been really solid. And he had 17 points, 17.6, 13 points, 18.3. And then he lays a less than 1 point outing because of the fumble that he had. And Yeah, I think it's a little scary now as he heads into this matchup. It's a scary secondary that they're going against. And I mean, it's scary even just, you and I were speaking during the weekend about how the value of Garrett Wilson sort of has gone down. And now all of a sudden these rumors start to creep in about he might be mates with Devontae Adams in the offseason. This is Jets potentially could go after him, and they did go after him. It's been reported at the trade deadline, and so we'll see what happens in the offseason, but might actually be a good thing for Garrett Wilson if Devontae Adams come in, they get Aaron Rodgers back. That's a conversation for a whole other day. As far as it goes this week, though, I don't know that you can feel so confident in Garrett Wilson, at least for the rest of the season, until Tim Boyle proves us otherwise.
Yeah, you can. I feel like you got to see a week or two. Obviously, you're starting Brees Hall. That's probably about it for New York this week. Miami is a different story. I think it's a tough matchup. Of course, the Jets defense is arguably one of the toughest in the NFL, and it's never going to be an easy game, especially in New York. So from that standpoint, I temper expectations a tiny bit, but you're gonna still go with your guys in Miami. Tua, you're probably still starting them. I think looking at it, just the running game is a interesting one because Achan came back in his first game and then he went out in the first quarter and he could have come back, but they kept him out precautionary, and obviously that stinks as an Achan owner. You're expecting, oh well, he's gonna come back and be the Devon Achan from a couple weeks ago before he got injured. And they take him out in the first quarter. So that stinks. I think just kind of keep an eye on it because obviously there's going to be injury news coming out in the next couple of days or so, and that'll tell you more if you can really rely on him on Friday. But you're probably starting Mostert still, and then the wide receivers with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I don't know how you can't start those guys.
Yeah, you're obviously going to start all of those guys. I think that as far as the running game goes, that's the situation to monitor just based on, Achan really didn't get any work. It just kind of was like in and out. He just felt a little bit of a tweak in the knee. And so they want to be cautious with him. Obviously, this guy has been electric when he's been in for his rookie season. And so first back, they're going to try to temper how they get in there. And the Jets defense has been really good against the pass, not so great against the run. I think that, that's one of the knocks on this Jets defense is they kind of leave the middle of the field wide open for those running backs to go through. Curious to see what they do to try to counteract that, especially as they're playing against one of the most high-powered offenses in the entire league. But I wouldn't be afraid to start one of the running backs against the Jets, I should say.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. It's clearly Mostert right now, and then just continue to monitor the Achan situation.
Yeah, completely. And then just last thing I'll say here is make sure that you start your guys, whether they're playing on Thanksgiving on the Thursday games or on the Black Friday game. Make sure you do not put them in your flex spot. Save those spots for Sunday because obviously you never know what's going to happen as the week progresses as far as injury goes, things like that. Just make sure that you have those spots open. Very important strategy here as we go forward.
Agreed.
All right, so we jump into the Sunday slate here, and we start out Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Zach, let's first start out with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it seems like Jaylen Warren is going to be the guy as far as the wide receiver, as far as the running back room, goes. 9 carries, 129 yards, and a touchdown, 3 catches, 16 yards. He's just balling out. And listen, I get that there's the split between him and Najee, but he just looks like the better player.
So I'm going to stop you right there because obviously the big news that came out today. And I mean, I feel like Steelers fans have been asking for this for 3 years now, and maybe the happiest day of their lives came earlier as Matt Canada, their offensive coordinator, was fired. And it's actually the first time I think since like 1940 or something, like very long
42,
time, yeah,
1942.
very long time ago that they fired a coach mid-season. So barely ever happens, rarely happens in Pittsburgh. But I mean, I'm behind Pittsburgh Steelers fans here, Brett. Like this needed to happen. They got a young quarterback in Kenny Pickett who looks lost because he's just listening to Matt Canada, and they are doing nothing on offense. That's the biggest thing in the last couple of years. Their offense has been terrible. Najee came in. They were like, oh, well, Najee's unbelievable. He's going to be great. Hasn't gotten it. Like his rookie year was great, and then the rest has just been on and off. They needed to make this change. I think, I'm curious what's going to happen. Obviously, question on who's going to be calling plays. And also this is not the easiest matchup. Cincinnati's kind of a tough defense to go up against, especially on the road. But for right now, I agree that Jaylen Warren is clearly a guy that you're throwing in your flex spot because the explosive play, the catches out of the backfield, that's huge. I wouldn't be surprised if they got almost all of these guys involved. Like George Pickens has been on and off. Deontay Johnson's been on and off. Like there's so many. Pat Fryermuth's been on and off. Like, every single guy has been so inconsistent because of just how this offense has been run. It's time for a change, and I'm very excited, Brett. I really am. I'm very excited to see how this offense can fully run how it's supposed to. I mean, there's a lot of talent there, and a lot of these guys can show out each and every week.
Yeah, I'm just tempering my expectations as far as it goes this week. Yeah, Warren hits the flex. I think that you probably can't start Najee unless you're in a dire situation and you're sort of injury riddled or whatever on your team. But even so, like he's a flex option at best right now. I'm not starting any of the receivers. Deontay Johnson, yeah, but you're not starting anybody. Just because we really don't know. It's very unknown. You know, I don't know that there's probably better options on your, I should say it that way. You know, and then, you know, we look at the other side of the field in Cincinnati, and obviously Joe Burrow goes down. He's done for the year. So they bring in Jake Browning, and that's a complete unknown. We really don't know how this offense is going to run with a completely new quarterback. He was 8 of 14, 68 yards and a touchdown. Yes, it went to Jamar Chase. It was at the end of the game, though. Really nothing there in the touchdown. You're starting Jamar Chase because, of course, you are. And I just think this is going to end up being Joe Mixon's show. And anyone who has Joe Mixon, all of a sudden, he becomes like a potential running back one of any given week based on the output that I think that he's going to be able to produce.
Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, there's going to be some people that'll say T. Higgins. If you see Jake Browning throwing at the T. Higgins, let me know. And then I'll tell you that you can end up starting because it's just been that kind of year for T. Higgins that I definitely can't trust him, especially with a new quarterback coming in.
Yeah, and he's been injured. And so, listen, he missed the last 2 games, and we'll see if he even gets back into this one. And if he does, I think he's pretty limited to begin with. And so now you factor in the backup quarterback throwing him the ball on limited snaps. It's not really a recipe for anything great. Listen, I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago when we talked about trade targets. Like T. Higgins is a potential buy low guy in Dynasty right now, just based on the fact of his contract's up at the end of the year. He's not going to have great output to finish this season. And he's potentially going to be a number 1 receiver on a different team next year. And so that's a guy I'm going out. I'm trying to grab him. Whatever owner has him definitely is frustrated with this season with him and probably will give him up for low. So that's a guy I'm going out to try to go acquire.
Agreed, Brett.
All right, so let's jump into the next matchup. It is Jacksonville at Houston, and two quarterbacks here in CJ Stroud and in Trevor Lawrence. Zach, we spoke a little bit about the Jaguars, so let's jump over to the Houston Texans first. Tank Dell, 8 catches, 149 yards, a touchdown. He had 10 targets in this one. Nico Collins had 11 targets in this one. He had 7 for 65, no touchdown, but it's okay because it seems like these two guys have just all of a sudden come forward and they're top options now at wide receiver if you own them.
Yeah, Brett. It's week 12 now, and I'm officially I'm here. Tank Dell is the thing, Brett. Tank Dell is the thing. So 100% you're starting him each and every week. Just lock him in your lineup. He's the number one there, clearly. Just getting the targets plus just the big plays. That just stands out. And getting those big plays, you're setting yourself up to have success, a lot of fantasy points, getting touchdowns. That touchdown was one of the best touchdowns I think you'll see all season. By the way, I don't know if you saw it, like you remember it, like unbelievable. CJ Stroud out of the pocket throws an absolute dart, and Tank Dell goes up top to go get it behind his back. So just a perfect duo, these two, and you're gonna keep riding it as long as they go, because they've been rock solid, especially the last couple of weeks. Really, really good duo, one of the best in the NFL. And then even though it wasn't a great week for Dalton Schultz, probably going to throw him in there too. He got the touchdown in the end, so just going to be a red zone target for them. I think those three guys are what I'm looking at, and of course CJ Stroud. Of course, that's an obvious start at this point. But the pass catchers, those three guys, in Dell, Collins, and Schultz, you probably can't go wrong with any of the three of them, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been pretty explosive with all of them. And yeah, Schultz this past week, he got the touchdown, which kind of saved the day. Didn't have a high output, but, it kind of seems to be each week's a little bit different in terms of, who's getting the ball. But yeah, I mean, you're starting all three of them. I don't know that you can really shy away from it. I think the Devin Singletary thing is very interesting, though, and how that sort of has shifted in the last couple of weeks. Where it seems like Singletary now is going to be the league going forward. Over Dameon Pierce, it looks like he sort of has won himself the number one job. And listen, 22 carries, 111 or 112 yards, got a touchdown. Like, you got to probably put him in as well, based on the fact that his volume is insane right now. And so, yeah, I think that this offense is going to just continue to roll. And Tank Dell is exciting, and shout out to our dad, Freddie Malamud, who has Tank Dell and CJ Stroud on his dynasty team. And it's like he might have a pretty good partnership for a few years here.
Yeah, he's having a blast with that. As far as Singletary, you're still gonna wait for Dameon Pierce, because I feel like, yes, it's great right now, but once Pierce comes back, I can't just think that Houston's going to be like, oh, well, forget about Dameon Pierce. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to end up getting him a workload that's just good enough, but also kind of brings Devin Singletary's value definitely down. Right now, especially just monitor it for this weekend. Like, if Dameon Pierce is out again, you're definitely starting Devin Singletary. But it's something to keep an eye on if Pierce does come back.
Very fair. I think that as far as it goes, the last couple of weeks that Pierce and Singletary were playing, the snap count seemed to be going down for Pierce, where it was going up for Singletary, just based on the efficiency of the runs. And so, it was sort of the ride the hot hand, just they weren't getting the output that they really wanted on Pierce. And obviously, they're going to give him that opportunity to get himself back into it. I agree with you. So, temper the expectations a little bit on Singletary. when Pierce comes back, just because I agree. I think that there won't be as much of an opportunity for Singletary.
Definitely fair, Brett. As far as Jacksonville, I mean, it's pretty easy. Start your guys here. Like, I mean, Lawrence, of course, the ETN, and then the couple of wide receivers with Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, and then Evan Ingram at tight end. Like, all of those guys have been consistent. Well, yeah, there's been a couple weeks that one's great, the other one's not. I would start all 5 of those guys and just lock it in.
I agree. I think you're starting all those guys. I don't know if there's any real debate other than if you have one of those tight ends. Evan Ingram he's been okay. He's been like a mid-year tight end 1. You know, if you have a Laporta, if you have even a Trey McBride, I'd put him in ahead of Evan Ingram, just because the amount of volume going his way has been higher for both of those guys. And obviously we hope Sam Laporta's volume gets back up. But, you know, that's the only way I can see you benching a guy like an Evan Ingram.
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, we jump into our next matchup, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Indianapolis Colts, 1 p.m. start. Zach, Indianapolis comes off of their bye week. However, in week 10, they played the New England Patriots, and seems like Jonathan Taylor's just basically run away with this number 1 job. No questions asked. He had 23 carries on the game, 69 yards, a touchdown. Zach Moss, 1 carry for 2 yards. Is it just, what is Zach Moss's value now?
He's the handcuff for Jonathan Taylor. I mean, that's how you just got to put it. I think he's the handcuff. If Taylor goes down, then of course you got Zach Moss. And thinking about it then, like, he could end up being a really, really solid RB2 in that situation. But obviously Taylor's healthy right now, and it's Taylor's backfield. We kind of knew that once he was going to get that contract and got back on the field and got 100% healthy, it was going to end up being Jonathan Taylor all the way. So that's clearly shown. And I think it's going to end up being a good week for them. They're at home and they're going up against Tampa Bay. I've talked about it earlier. Tampa Bay's defense, not great, has struggled to keep offenses limited in the last couple of weeks and throughout this season. So it's going to be a big week for him. And then, of course, Pittman and as well as Josh Downs. Those 2 guys, you're going to be starting them because it could be a monster day for those 2. So those 3, I'm confident in saying, yeah, it's going to be a good week for those guys.
I think it's going to be a get-right game, especially for a guy like Josh Downs, who didn't exactly have a great output against the Patriots. They did a really good job of shutting him down and kind of forcing the ball to go to Pittman. So now, you know, Josh Downs has that opportunity to go forward, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. But, yeah, I think that as far as it goes with those 3 guys, those are the guys you're trusting. Staying away from Gardner Minshew just based on, you know, I think that the value is not even there from a super flex. He's a low-end super flex play for me.
Agreed, Brett. I mean, for Tampa Bay, it's kind of same, I would say, of like start your guys on Tampa Bay and because I mean they've been solid. The one that has been a little bit off is Chris Godwin. I'd still be starting him. I still think you gotta kind of start him. Indy's defense has let up a fair amount of yards. Their passing defense has kind of been a little shaky, and some surprising news today that they waived Shaq Leonard, who was one of the best, not even like 3 years ago. He was arguably the best linebacker, best middle linebacker in the entire league. So crazy to see that earlier today. I think you got to keep starting Godwin, though. You're starting Evans, and then, of course, Rachaad White. Definitely some guys to really look at. Even though Kate Otten got those targets last week, not as high as some people. I'd probably stay away. I think it was more like garbage time against a team like San Fran. I think this one they'll be locked in and they'll be going to their top guys there.
Yeah, as far as it goes with them, I agree on all fronts. I think that yes, you have to start Godwin, and I agree with you actually, Cade Otton. I think that the Cade Otton thing is weird. He's a guy I had on Dynasty last season. Traded him. I think that the Tom Brady effect really is what led to Cade Otton's value being there. We saw it a little bit here from Baker Mayfield, but as far as the Cade Otton experience, I think that it's never going to be as high as it was when Tom Brady was his quarterback, plain and simple. And so I'm staying away from him, and I'm even staying away from him in Dynasty. I know he's out there on our waivers right now. Not a guy I'm very high on.
Definitely fair. Definitely fair.
All right, so we jump into our next matchup. It is New Orleans at Atlanta. Let's first start here with the Atlanta Falcons because we did talk about it just a little while ago. They go back to Desmond Ridder, and so Zach now heading into a tough matchup at that against New Orleans. Yes, it's not in the dome; it is in Atlanta, a different dome. But what do we think as far as the receivers go, and Kyle Pitts especially too?
It's weird, Brett, because I would say you're obviously starting Bijan.
Yeah.
After that, I it's tough. I would say look at your options. Number one, I think Drake London probably just gonna throw him in as a flex play. Um, I'm not confident in Kyle Pitts. I haven't been confident in him the entire year. Um, I would probably say those two guys though, in Bijan and maybe London as a flex. Uh, that's where I'm feeling. Just because I think we've seen Ritter in the past, and the upside for these guys, I feel like just gets worse and worse when he's in the lineup, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at Drake London's output here, taking out week 9 where he did not play, he's gotten 9 catches, 6 catches, 5 catches, 6 catches. Last week he had 3 catches. Or rather, last week they were on the bye. The week before he had 3 catches. So yeah, it wasn't a great output. Taylor Heineke there, but Desmond Ridder back. I think that those outputs have been really good through the year. So yeah, Drake London to me, he's a flex play just because I think his volume will go back up from Desmond Ridder. Whether or not the ball actually gets to him instead of going over his head, that's a whole other conversation. But I think as far as the volume goes, Drake London is the favorite target of Desmond Ridder, and so that to me says you have to play him in the flex because there is the potential of him running a touchdown.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those two guys, I'd probably just be the most confident in. I think nobody else that I can really think of that I'm like, all right, I got to put them in. But those two guys, I feel like they'll get their volume. Whether they turn it into much is always the question mark. And you're hoping so as owners of those two guys. With New Orleans, they're coming off the bye as well. It's interesting because I feel like, did we get news on Derek Carr, Brett? Is he back? Is he not? Do we know?
Well, he's still dealing with the concussion protocol, it seemed like, and so that's kind of the only update, and it's Tuesday right now, so I'm sure that we will hear. Obviously, it's a Sunday game, so the coach doesn't have to speak on Tuesdays. He does speak on Mondays, though, so we should get more news tomorrow, just as far as it goes. But yeah, he's still in concussion protocol, and so he's got to put at least, I think it's one full practice in and another limited practice. So something to monitor for this week. There is time for him to get though.
So that's fair. I think just going off of that, Chris Olave did look good with Jameis Winston. It might have been the one week that I was like, oh, well, all right, Chris Olave is pretty good. Why not? I think that's one thing as an Olave owner that I might be just hoping that Jameis is in there and we're going with it. I think from that standpoint, you got Olave, of course, and then Alvin Kamara is a lock in your lineup. after that, I feel like it depends on the quarterback, Brett. Just kind of when it comes to Michael Thomas, I think that kind of you can go either which way. You can probably talk better about it than I can, though.
Yeah, so Michael Thomas gets put on IR today, actually. So
Oh,
obviously you're not putting, yeah, you're
don't
not
do
going to put Michael
that.
Thomas in your lineup because you'll probably get 0. So he is out for 4 games. And listen, the injury bug caught up with Michael Thomas. It was a long time coming. I think that the fact that he stayed healthy for this long was a really good testament to how much he really pushed himself this offseason to get himself back in shape. Obviously, the injury bug, though, has been following around Michael Thomas for the last couple of years. As far as it goes, though, with the receivers, listen, I like Rashid Shaheed. I think that Rashid Shaheed is going to have a big boost here, just from the standpoint of doesn't really matter which quarterback he has, Jameis or Carr, both of them can air it out. I think that bodes well for a guy like Rashid Shaheed, especially if he starts to fill into that Michael Thomas role. I'm looking to see if they can handle the over the middle Michael Thomas work as well as Rashid Shaheed's deep threat, and they can sort of mix the two together. I think that's sort of what's going to come about. And then Olave, listen, yeah, obviously starting Olave. I think that the value probably is a wide receiver 2 right now on Chris Olave, and there's a potential that listen, if he has another good game, he could go back up. Kamara is the interesting one for me this week. Obviously, you're playing him, but I am tempering expectations because while Atlanta's been okay against the pass, they've been really good against the run. And so to me, I think that, I'm tempering my expectation here with Kamara.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just of course the receptions out of the backfield that he gets are huge for him.
Yeah.
That's kind of what makes him Alvin Kamara. I mean, just the overall takeaway: don't start Michael Thomas. You'll probably get a 0 in there.
Yeah, I don't know that you could start Michael Thomas and feel confident in that. My dynasty team not doing too well with the injuries right now, and Michael Thomas seems to be the poster child of the injuries now.
Got it.
Yeah, so let's jump right into our next one. And Zach, I'm not really expecting a huge output from this one as we head to MetLife Stadium on Sunday. New England Patriots, they head in to East Rutherford and take on the New York Giants. Zach, for New England, let's first just start with them. Non-committal Bill Belichick on who's going to start at quarterback this week, whether it's going to be Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. I think that's the most telling thing coming into this one, just because it seems like this is the first time where Bill Belichick really didn't say, like, Mac is his guy. Just from a dynasty standpoint, I think that is the most significant of news. As far as it goes, though, for this week, I don't know that you could really play anyone. I would absolutely go out and grab Demario Douglas based on the fact that his share is just ridiculous right now. He's just getting a ton of targets. Yes, you're playing Ramondre Stevenson. Plain and simple. I'm not even talking about that. Yeah, I saw you make a face. I'm playing Ramondre. That's a no questions asked guy. As far as the rest of the offense goes, I don't know that you can play anybody, even Demario Douglas. I think that Demario Douglas is at least worth an ad, though, based on the target share he's gotten in the last bunch of weeks. But I'm staying away from everyone otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Ramondre, 20 carries the last time they played. That gave me a ton of confidence. It really did. The week before that, he had the long touchdown against Washington. Then the week after, he gets that solid output against Indianapolis. Just huge for him. I think he's kind of turned himself back into an RB2 rather than a flex guy. Just because, I mean, you see that kind of volume and people are worried about Zeke. Is Zeke going to take some of that workload? And Ramondre said, no, give me it back. And all right, this is my backfield. I think that no matter who's starting at quarterback, that's going to be the go-to guy this week. Just because, I mean, the Giants defense is good. But I feel like teams go with what they've done best, and I think the running game is the focus for New England, especially this week. Just the questions at quarterback. I agree with you on Demario Douglas, probably a low end flex, just kind of a long shot kind of guy. Also depends on who's starting at quarterback. I'd probably monitor that before making a decision on him if to put him at the end of my lineup.
Prediction: Ramondre will score a touchdown, but it will come after a 40-yard bomb that goes for a pass interference that leaves them on the goal line, because the Giants seem to do that every single game where there's some sort of pass interference on a long bomb that results in some sort of goal line touchdown for the opposing team. It happens every single week. As far as the Giants go, listen, it's the Tommy DeVito show. 18 of 26, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Tommy DeVito pretty much balled out. And yeah, it was against the Commanders, so you got to temper your expectations. But listen, when you're the quarterback of the New York football team and you have that sort of a performance, people turn their heads and make a big deal of it. And so, yeah, Tommy DeVito had a fantastic week. Now looks to build on that confidence heading forward. To me, he's still a low-end flex play or low-end super flex play. And he's probably going to end up being my super flex play now that Zach Wilson happened. So, excited to see what happens. And obviously his output last week, he was over 20 points. Not expecting that by any means this week. But listen, as far as the rest of the offense goes, Saquon Barkley, obviously you're playing him. There's no questions asked about that. Darius Slayton, I think, is the interesting one here because it seems to be Tommy DeVito's favorite target. Had 5 targets last week and 4 catches, 82 yards. But more importantly, he looked for him in the red zone and he scored a touchdown. And so to me, if Slayton can get himself into the end zone, I think he's worth a flex option.
I agree with you. I would probably say in any other week that, Darius Slayton's probably, a guy to start in a flex spot. Except he's going up against this New England defense, and we kind of always know what's going to happen. The favorite target, it's going to be a week off for them. So that's probably the one worry for me, and I'd probably end up staying away. But I feel like the week after and future weeks, Slayton's definitely a guy to pick up. I think putting him on your roster, I think he's rostered in like 2% of leagues or something, Brett. Like it's like 2% of leagues, insane stuff. So go get him, go pick him up, because he could end up being a really, really solid option. But for this week, I agree with you. DeVito's a low end super flex, and Saquon's a lock it in, no doubt about it.
Yeah, the guy is free. He's literally available in like 98% of leagues. And so, I don't know that you can just leave a number 1 receiver out there, no matter what team he's on.
Definitely.
All right, so let's jump to the last game here in the 1 o'clock window as Carolina travels to Tennessee. And the Panthers take on Titans. Zach, let's first start out with the Carolina Panthers. And listen, it hasn't been pretty for them this season, and they take a big loss to the Dallas Cowboys, 33-10. Wasn't a ton going on for anybody in this fantasy world except for Adam Thielen, who had 8 catches for 74 yards, didn't score a touchdown. But this has just kind of been a year to forget for Bryce Young. And, looking forward, like, what do we even think about his future on this Carolina Panthers team?
So I think one thing I'll say is that it's his rookie year, and I think we expected this, Brett. I did. I think that people expected Bryce Young. He was the number 1 overall pick, going to a team that just gave up their top weapon. Defense was mediocre and now near the bottom of the NFL. And they just weren't going to do much this year. And they were just going to start to get him going and start to get him learning. Obviously, it's turned into making him look bad. And I think for his confidence, that's not great. But I think for the future, I think just relax on Bryce Young. I think he's a very, very talented player. Um, and we see most situations when you're thrown into a bad situation, it's never going to end well. Just especially for a rookie quarterback. I think just waiting and you weren't planning for Bryce Young to be terrific this year. You were kind of planning for a bad year from Bryce Young because he's learning and it's a rookie year. Um, as for like dynasty, you're holding on to him and of course waiting till the real Bryce Young comes in, and I think that'll be next year once they get this offense completely rolling and just keep building this roster. But he does, I will say, like even though Adam Thielen's old, like he does have a kind of number one option because it's his go-to target, and it's worked every single week for him. So I think that's the biggest thing, a confidence booster for him. Another one is he's going up in this matchup now, and this is kind of the matchups of all matchups this season when it comes to passing defense, because Tennessee, I don't think they have a passing defense because they let up so many yards to everybody, and offenses are just torching them. So I'm expecting a huge week for this passing game. Expect the ball to be slinging around because Tennessee's offense has been solid. Like they've been solid. Yes, it was a rough week for Levis last week against Jacksonville, but I think Jacksonville, you got to give them credit. It was in Jacksonville, and of course they have a tough defense as well. But as for Carolina this week, you're starting Adam Thielen, and I'd probably end up thinking about starting Bryce Young in Superflex. Like I think it's going to be a bounce back week for him. Just kind of settle everything and just show what he really is and what he could bring to the NFL.
Yeah, it's valid. I think that, he's making strides and you can see it. And yes, the struggle is there because the team's not good. There's all these people saying, pull them out, just let them tank. Well, they don't own their first round pick this year. They traded for Bryce Young. They traded away their first round pick. So that belongs to the Chicago Bears right now. So no, you're throwing the guy in there. Yes, I don't care that there's no protection on it. If he has an awful season, it doesn't matter. They don't own their own first pick. So therefore, there's nothing to lose by throwing him out there, getting the experience. Adam Thielen is just the only guy I would say that warrants an every single week starting fantasy spot. That said, I agree with you. I think that the matchup this week is just too good to leave Bryce Young on your bench. He's a good super flex option for me. As far as it goes on Tennessee's side, it's pretty interesting because, they went and they played Jacksonville last week, and, DeAndre Hopkins seems to be starting to come around quite a bit now in these last couple of weeks. And now I would say that, he's probably a solid flex option. Where I kind of had him on the bench a couple of weeks. I've started to see this consistency. He had like 3 out of 4 weeks were like really good for him. So I'm putting him back into my lineup. I think he'll have a solid output. Will Levis, he's a super flex option for me right now. He's nothing more than that, but he's certainly nothing less than that. I think that the output and being able to score touchdowns has worked in his favor. So I keep him in as well there. And then, listen, the struggle of Derrick Henry is just you contemplate whether you should even put him in your lineup or you bench him. And I go back and forth on it. The last 2 weeks he had, 11 rushes for 24 yards with no touchdown, and then 10 rushes for 38 yards and no touchdown. I'm expecting a better, stat line this week because he is playing Carolina, a team that has struggled against the run, but I'm not expecting that much more. And so, I contemplate whether I put him in I flex or if I bench him. And right now I'm still kind of debating between the two.
I am throwing Derrick Henry in my lineup this week because of the matchup. It's literally the worst. It's the best possible matchup that he could have gotten after 2 rough weeks. So I think he's going to have a really solid game. Maybe not a 40-point game from traditional Derrick Henry, but he'll be in the end zone and probably will get 100 yards. I think that's what I'm expecting. They're going to ride him. They know he's been struggling, so I think looking at that, like they're gonna get him going. They're at home, and Carolina's not been great. I think it'll end up being if Tennessee's defense is able to kind of control the lead, and Derrick Henry's gonna get those yards. They're gonna keep giving him the ball. He'll get those carries. I feel like there's a good chance of that happening this week, just with the matchup. And you mentioned the other guy, DeAndre Hopkins, who, I mean, if you like a couple weeks ago, he was struggling, kind of getting things going. Was it going to be on and off? And then they finally put in Will Levis, and I think that's the greatest thing that could have happened for Hopkins, because that chemistry is spot on right now. You're going to keep starting him. Of course, another touchdown last week, so that gives you a lot of confidence. And I think heading into this week against Carolina, whose defense has just been meh, you're gonna start Hopkins.
I agree. Let's jump right into the 4 o'clock window here with the LA Rams traveling Arizona to take on Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. First, let's just start with the Rams here. We mentioned off the top of the show, Cooper Kupp battling a low ankle sprain. Sorry, I don't know why that was so hard to say. Low ankle sprain, and so he is day to day. So we will monitor sort of what we have going forward. And we talked about Tutu Atwell potentially coming in as an option there. As far as it goes, though, with the Rams, besides those two, Puka Nacua, pretty easy. You're playing him, means no worries. What does mean some worries here is Matt Stafford. Just based on the fact that he really has been struggling. We're starting to see him slow down from a fantasy standpoint, and he's scoring right around 10, 12 points every week. It's a very low super flex option for me. Probably not starting him in any other format, though, other than super flex. And then I think the big story is that Kyren Williams is coming back this week. So, Zach, what do we think as far as Kyren goes? Because you are, in fact, a Kyren owner.
I'm expecting a kind of a full go here. It kind of told me when they waived Darrell Henderson, which caught me by surprise. It really did. I was like, okay, it's Darrell Henderson could end up taking some of the work this week, and they get Kyren in there. Maybe Royce Freeman or something like. But then once they waived Darrell Henderson, like you kind of proved that it's Kyren Williams backfield. It's not confirmed completely yet that he's coming back, but you would think like he's ready to be reinstated from IR, so that's going to be good for him. So I think he's probably going to end up being in there, but I think it'll end up being a full go for him plus Puka Nacua. Those two are pretty locked in lineups. I think that's probably about it. You mentioned Stafford, probably a super flex play, just because of it's not been great. I think it could end up being better this week with a matchup against Arizona.
Yeah, I agree. I think just as far as Arizona goes, it's a little murky also. I'm playing Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, very solid super flex option, and low end quarterback one right now. Obviously, we're only one game to really digest. But as far as it goes with Kyler, one full game, I should say, because he was sort of coming off the injury that first game, so it was a little iffy. But now we're going off of this last game where he looked pretty good. Like he's going to start to get himself back into the rhythm of running around. 7 carries for 51 yards, scored a touchdown this past week. So I think that as far as the rushing output goes, that's sort of where he borders into that quarterback one range. As far as the rest of them go, it's a little interesting because, Rondell Moore only had one catch. Trey McBride had 5 catches, but only 43 yards. I think that he is a lower end tight end one option heading into this week. And Marquise Hollywood Brown has just been really disappointing this year. Another game with 2 catches for 18 yards, -6 yards on. So to me, I'm staying away from him. I get that he's the reputation of him, but I'm staying away from him until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I think, Brett, the best place I'd put him is a low-end flex right now, just because you kind of have to wait and see what goes on. Because, I mean, I'm a Hollywood Brown owner. I expected Kyler to come back in and, pick up where they left off, the two of them. It just has not been there. Only 2 receptions. Did have 5 targets, but just 2 receptions is not enough, especially only for 18 yards. And then Greg Dortch comes in and has a big day. So that doesn't make you feel good. Having 6 receptions on 8 targets, 76 yards. That's not great. I wouldn't all of a sudden be like, oh, well, Greg Dortch is a guy. I'd maybe pick him up and stash him just to see if he can be consistent. But other than that, it's kind of slim pickings in Arizona's wide receiver group. With guys that you can completely trust each and every week in your lineup. Of course, I agree with you with Trey McBride, a low-end tight end one. And then, of course, James Conner's in your lineup. But the wide receiver room is definitely weird. And I'd probably end up staying away from all of those guys.
Yeah, you mentioned James Conner. It's a guy I forgot there. Yeah, you're playing him. Hasn't been amazing, but I think that it's going to get better. And so he's still going in there. I'm trusting him for now, moving forward.
Definitely. And as for LA, we already mentioned those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just right into that next matchup here. The last one in the 405 window, Cleveland Browns, as they travel to Mile High to take on the Broncos. Zach, let's start with Denver. Cortland Sutton, he had a pretty good game. 4 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. He was the leading scorer there for the Broncos. But other than that, it seemed to be a pretty nonchalant game against the Minnesota Vikings. They did get the win, 21-20. It was a great win for that team. But as far as the fantasy spots go, listen, Javonte wasn't that great. 11 carries, 37 yards. You don't feel great about him starting. He's probably a lower end running back this week. Jerry Jeudy's a flex option, I would say. And then Cortland Sutton, I think, is a solid flex option with the potential of more. But other than that, I don't know that you can really feel confident in any of these guys in your regular lineup spots.
I agree with you. I'm a little bit more confident on Cortland Sutton than the other guys, and I'll talk about him a little bit later. But I feel like, Javonte, you're putting him in your lineup, but you're not really optimistic just because of the matchup. Cleveland's defense is tremendous. And then the same with Jerry Jeudy. Yes, he'll get those targets, and yes, he'll end up getting some receptions, but not enough that you're going to end up being like, all right, got to lock him into my lineup. I think Sutton's the only guy like that I feel a little bit more confidence in. And like I said, I'll get to him in a bit.
Yeah, and then as far as Cleveland goes, David Njoku, 15 targets he had in this last game against Pittsburgh. 7 catches, 56 yards, and so he ends up being top scorer there for the Cleveland Browns. We obviously spoke last week about Deshaun Watson and the injury that ended his season. So Dorian Thompson-Robinson comes in. Listen, he played okay. 24 of 43, 165. Didn't have a touchdown, threw a pick, added 20 yards on the ground on 3 carries. And so he was okay. You're probably not playing him. Probably not playing him in Superflex right now. But as far as it goes with Njoku, I think that's where we're going to see him as a higher output guy at the top of the tight end board by the end of the week. Jerome Ford, listen, he had only 12 carries. He had 31 yards on the ground. Kareem Hunt, 12 carries, 36 yards on the ground. And so both of them very even, didn't really do much of anything from the air. One catch for or 3 catches for 1 yard for Kareem Hunt, 2 catches for 8 yards for Jerome Ford. And so, yeah, not much going either way. So I'm really not that confident in either one of the running backs going forward till one of them sort of put themselves out in front of the other one with the quarterback situation right now. But I'm curious to see what you think about these wide receivers here.
So for me, I mean, it came down to Ford's touchdown. He got the touchdown in the end. So that told me, okay, I'm going to keep starting him. I think he finished RB21 on the week. So you're like, all right, that's good enough. He's Jerome Ford. You're not expecting big time numbers, especially with Kareem Hunt right next to him. So I'm still confident starting Ford at least as my flex guy. Maybe with upside of an RB2 if he continues to get in the end zone. But I don't my feelings on Njoku and feelings for Njoku owners. I don't know if you're happy that he got 7 receptions or you're angry that there were 8 other balls that I guess he just didn't catch. Because you're like, oh, well, he could have had a monster day because he had 15 targets. But only 7 of them ended up getting to him. You're going to keep starting him, though, because that's ridiculous that he got 15 targets. And as long as DTR is there, you're kind of expecting the same out of that. I don't know the feelings on a guy like Amari Cooper, just because it's off between the relationship of a quarterback like DTR and then his top weapon. Cooper ended up getting 8 targets on the day, but only turned it into 4 receptions. There's some people that would stay away. That could be fair just because Denver's defense has also been really solid the last couple of weeks. They've locked down some top wide receivers, so you might end up staying away from a guy like Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Amari Cooper sort of has to prove himself going forward in order to get himself back into the good graces.
Definitely.
All right, so let's jump right into our next matchup here in the 425 window. Only a couple games here in the 425 window, and obviously that comes based off of the Thanksgiving slate. But we start with Kansas City at Las Vegas. Excited to see that Max Crosby versus Patrick Mahomes rematch that was sort of highlighted in the Netflix documentary Quarterback this past season. I'm really curious to see if Patrick Mahomes can actually find a favorite target not named Travis Kelce. And I'm curious to see if any of these Kansas City wide receivers can actually catch the ball. It was so frustrating to watch Patrick Mahomes run for his life, throw it right to guys, and they dropped it. Even Travis Kelce had a couple drops there. It was not fun to watch. And going against the Philadelphia Eagles, and they take a loss at home. I'm looking for a bounce back game from Matty. I think that he threw the ball 43 times, only had 177 yards for 2 touchdowns. He was running for his life. I felt like that was they were trying to put pressure on him. They were trying to make him make those sort of plays, and he was. That said, I think that it really just comes down to who is going to catch the ball here. We saw Kadarius Toney factor in. We saw Rashee Rice factor in. Justin Watson ended up being their top receiver this week. He's not even fantasy relevant at all. He was 5 catches for 53 yards, a touchdown. He had 11 targets in this game. You're not even looking at him on a roster right now at all. And so to me, it really comes down to Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. I don't even know that I could start a guy like a Rashee Rice this week because he didn't really prove anything. Guy I'm really looking at, Isaiah Pacheco. That dude is awesome. That dude runs super angry from the first whistle to the last whistle. That was awesome to see. 19 carries, 89 yards. Didn't get into the end zone. Kind of wish that he did though, just because I feel like he earned the performance from the Chiefs this weekend.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Brett. I think like just if you're the Chiefs, the best thing that came out of this game was, I mean, you saw Isaiah Pacheco. I think he's still running right now. He's a monster. He really is. So that gives you confidence. Put him in your fantasy lineups. I actually, it's interesting. Yeah. And he only put up 10.1 fantasy points just because of the yards. And then he got one reception. He got 19 for 89. That's only 8.9 fantasy points. Then he gets the reception and goes over 10. I benched him for the week because I was like, okay, I don't think there's a lot of upside against this Philly defense. Put him in your lineup because that gives you confidence going into a matchup against Vegas, whose run defense has not been great. So that's very great to see. And you're gonna keep putting him in your lineup. But I agree with you. I can't even start Rice this week. I think Kelce, of course, you're starting, and then of course Mahomes. But other than that, it's very thin of reliable fantasy options in Kansas City, which is weird to say with this kind of offense.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the ball, I think that it sort of is the same kind of name of the game, where it's like Devontae Adams and then who? And, we saw Hunter Renfrow factor into the game last week, and we saw Jacoby Myers factor in even less last week. And same thing with Michael Mayer. Like, I don't know that there's any real starter here outside of Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had not so great of a game. He had 14 carries for only 39 yards. Miami did a really good job against him to kind of just shut him down. So they had to throw the ball to Devontae. He had 7 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown, 13 targets. I think was eye-popping number there. Listen, this offense is kind of just broken right now. I think that moving forward, they need to sort of figure out how can we integrate more than just throw the ball to Devontae or give it to Josh Jacobs. It's got to be more than just that. So until that comes about, I don't know that I could start anybody except for those two guys.
Agree with you, Brett. Like, of course, Jacobs, you're still starting. Of course, the game script didn't help you. They were down for almost all of that game against Miami. So very hard to rely on Jacobs in the run game as well. But for this week, it's those two guys. They're in Vegas, so that kind of gives you a little bit more confidence there at home. So that'll probably help you heading into this week against Kansas City.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one and a pretty good matchup. Another good matchup here is the other 425 window game, and it is Buffalo at Philadelphia. Philadelphia coming off of that huge 21-17 win against the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football, and Buffalo coming off of another good win. Obviously, they kind of crushed the New York Jets, led to Zach Wilson being benched after they fire their offensive coordinator and bring in Joe Brady to call the plays. And let's just start first with Philadelphia. And it was kind of an interesting game against the Kansas City Chiefs, where it seemed like Kansas City's real job was to shut A.J. Brown down, and they really did do that. Only 1 catch for 8 yards. He did have 4 targets, but really no output. Just kind of burned the tape for A.J. Brown owners. I think that you've been very happy with the output that he's had over the last bunch of weeks. And so it was sort of the Devonta Smith game where he had 6 catches for 99 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but he did 8 targets. And so sort of the role reversal here. Hey, you're going to double A.J. Brown? Fine, we'll throw it to Devonta. That kind of was what happened there. DeAndre Swift, though, I thought was a real big factor. 12 carries, 76 yards. And so he's going right into the lineup. I don't know that you can debate that just based on the fact that Buffalo has been broken middle. I've been speaking about that for weeks and weeks, just based on the injury riddled Buffalo Bills defense. You're playing Swift, no questions asked. Devonta was back into your lineup. I don't know why you took him out. And AJ Brown, you're playing. Jalen Hurts, you're playing.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the story right now. Of course, with Goddard being out, too, I think that also really helped Devonta Smith. He was the
Completely.
go-to guy yesterday, and then looking at it for Swift, like just shown he's the lead guy in that backfield. Definitely a reliable guy, and he's kind of making the most of his carries. His longest carry was 35 yards, average 6.3 yards per carry on Monday night. So like great stuff, and he's kind of one of those guys that it looks like every single time he gets the ball, he can turn it into an insane amount of yards. So looks very dangerous out of the backfield. A very important player for a lot of fantasy owners. He's in RB2 with maybe some RB1 upside. It's kind of crazy just because of the workload that he gets, plus how dangerous he can be and the speed out of that backfield. Really, really important player for fantasy owners this season.
Yeah, and then just as far as Buffalo Bills go, yeah, it was the same kind of story where you're going to burn the tape if you had Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis was held without a catch, and Stephon Diggs was held to 4 catches for 27 yards, no touchdown at all. Seems like Dalton Kincaid seemed to be the main pass catcher here, where he got 6 catches for 46 yards, 7 targets, looked open over the middle, and it looked like that was the guy they were going to go to. Obviously, Khalil Shakir breaks off that huge run, built a touchdown, so his output seems to only really put the red flag, only put the siren bells up for a dynasty owner, where you go out and you grab him if he's out there on waivers, just to see what happens. I think the big thing here was that Josh Allen was able to steady his offense through 20 of 32, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns. That looked really good. And it was James Cook, I think, looked really good as well. 17 carries, 73 yards, had 3 catches for 29 yards, scored a touchdown through the air, which I think was really important for him, something that we've been talking about for pretty much the whole years, that he can't fall into the end zone. He falls into the end zone on a catch, which I thought was, that'll build the confidence between Josh Allen and James Cook of actually throwing the ball. But as far as it goes with the Bills, Cade, Cook, Allen, I think those 3 guys really shine through in their blowout of the Jets. Obviously, you're still starting Stephon Diggs, and then you're staying away kind of from the rest of those guys, I think.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, I feel like it's hard to say because I think in this one you're a little bit throwing the game script out for all of Buffalo, because this game was a blowout, and you're kind of going into this week and you're not expecting this one to be a blowout. I mean, you're going into one of the toughest places to play against a really tough defense, and although Pacheco looked great yesterday, I don't think James Cook has the same attributes that a guy like Isaiah Pacheco has. So it makes me a little bit worried. I was kind of surprised yesterday because, on Monday, because of course Pacheco, really talented player, but Philly's one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Their pass defense has been their weakness, and their pass defense looked so much better than their run defense. I think that's going to kind of change, and I think it might be a little bit of a rough week for James Cook, and I think they're going to end up relying a lot on Josh Allen to get them down the field. I think we'll see better days for Stephon Diggs, but kind of that's how the game script went against the Jets. And of course, Dalton Kincaid is in your lineup right now. He's just been one of the most consistent guys for Buffalo in the last couple of weeks, at least. I think of the guys, I would say Diggs and Allen, of course, you're starting. Kincaid, I think you're also starting. Cook, I'd probably have him as a flex guy. I think that's probably the area, um, with a little bit of tempered expectations just because of the matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as far as this goes, this matchup could end up being a shootout, though. So expecting some fireworks on both sides of the ball.
Definitely, definitely.
All right, so we jump into our Sunday night preview. Baltimore at the Los Angeles Chargers. Zach, I first think that when the schedule makers made this matchup, I thought this was going to be even more high powered than what it seems to have now been. I think both of these teams have sort of struggled at times. Baltimore obviously not struggling as much as the LA Chargers have, but seemed like they kind of tried to get the ball to their receivers last week in what was even a really good win against Cincinnati. A little bit of a struggle there to get, guys like Zay Flowers the ball. Only 3 catches, 43 yards. Not a huge output. I think that the game script also sort of shifted when they lost Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews obviously goes down, fibula broken, and they said he could be out for the season. Then they come back earlier today, and say, listen, he might be there if we make a deep playoff run. The testing came back better than we initially thought it would be. And so I think the game script sort of shifts a bit of who you're trying to get the ball to. I don't think that that's Isaiah Likely. I think that's Zay Flowers. I think that they're going to start to use Zay Flowers. Sort of, they kind of used him at the beginning of the season where he was short yardage and just kind of use your yards after catch to your advantage. That's sort of how I see it going. We started to see Odell start to come into his own a bit. 4 catches, 116 yards. Did get 7 targets because it seemed like they kind of let him, free reign a little bit more. They were trying to put the cap on Zay Flowers. And so, I would say those two guys are potentially options there. Obviously, you're going to start Zay just because he is the number one option. Odell becomes absolutely a flex consideration because I think he's going to continue to get that volume. And then, listen, Gus Edwards keeps going through. 12 carries for 62 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also added 8 yards through the air. I think that you probably have to put him in your lineup as well because the Gus bus just continues to roll through. He's probably a running back too, I would say.
Yeah, I'm riding with the Gus bus. I agree with you. I think that's going to be a go-to for them, especially with Andrews' injury. And then I agree with you. I think Flowers and Odell could be the options for Lamar. Especially this week. They're going up against the Chargers, who've kind of struggled to keep opponents from going off against them. Their defense, it's gotten better as weeks have gone on, but still a open defense, and they can definitely be hurt. This one's in LA, so should be a really good matchup for these two teams. For the Chargers, I would say it's going to be Herbert, of course, with Eckler, and then after that, of course, it's Keenan Allen as well. But then Quentin Johnston could be a flex option. I think it did get better as last week, Brett, if I'm correct, and that's just something to keep an eye on. Baltimore's defense is really good. That's the one thing I would be a tiny bit shaky about, but it's definitely a consideration just because of the matchup. It might be a little bit tough.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that, Brandon Staley came out and was adamant against the media about going to guys other than Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston's development. And listen, Johnston, he only had 2 catches for 21 yards, 6 targets. Wasn't great. You probably still have to consider him as a flex option because he is still the number 2 guy in that offense as far as the pass catchers go. Eckler didn't have a great game. 10 carries, 64 yards, only 2 catches for 6 yards. Not his best game. He just didn't come through in this one. He's going against a Baltimore defense that's a little bit of a tougher matchup as well. Obviously, I'm not saying bench Austin Eckler. He's a set it and forget it guy. But I think you also have to temper your expectations here yet again. And as far as it goes with the other guys, like you're starting Keenan Allen, you're starting Justin Herbert. But that's kind of it. And it's kind of interesting just how this Los Angeles Chargers season has gone. And I'm curious to see if they do, in fact, keep Brandon Staley heading into next season.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. It should be a really good matchup between these two teams.
All right, so we do have a viewer question here from Dylan. Need advice who to drop for Isaiah Likely? Need to drop one. Lost both Anthony Richardson and Marcus this season. Have Trey McBride. Good job on that one. 12-team PPR. Stroud, Pollard, Cook, Mixon, Herbert, Hunt, Spears, Diggs, Ayuk, Hollywood Brown, Down, Reed, McBride. Baltimore and Detroit are his defense and special teams guys.
Damn, Brad, he's got a good team.
It is a good team.
I was gonna say I'm a bit stuck here. I would say if worst comes to worst, I think the worst guy on his roster is Kareem Hunt. I think that's probably it. It's hard to say, but I just feel like those guys are valuable. Khalil Herbert came back and had 16 carries right away. I think my confidence right now, though, is Spears has been solid behind Henry. I wouldn't give him up because if Henry all of a sudden something happens, like Tajay Spears is one of the most important handcuffs in fantasy football right now. Reed has been electric and might be the wide receiver 1 for all we know in Green Bay. And you could drop one of the defenses, but I think having those two solid defenses it's going to be important come playoff time. So keeping those guys, I definitely think so. I would probably say Hunt is the worst guy on the roster. It's not great to drop him, but I think you kind of have to in this spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, listen, McBride is going to end up being your starter there just because, listen, I think that the output of volume that he's getting, it's going to keep him up. Obviously, now Kyler Murray makes you a little more confident there. As far as it goes, though, yeah, I agree with trying to get Likely and cementing yourself there. I agree with you. I think it's Kareem Hunt, and I think that it just has to do with the fact of the quarterback situation and that Deshaun Watson's not there anymore for the rest of the year. I agree as far as the Spears thing goes. Like, there's the high potential there. Downs, same thing. Reed, same thing. You're not dropping Hollywood Brown, even though he hasn't been performing, because it could just be any given week where all of a sudden he becomes a favorite target again and he goes back onto the trail. So, yeah, I think it's Hunt. I'm keeping those defenses, though. I do agree with you, Zach, as far as it goes with having two defenses on your team, especially two solid defenses, kind of becomes that every single week. You kind of pick the best matchup, go back and forth. Very important come playoff time. But good question there, Dylan, because, yeah, I think that your lineup is pretty loaded. And so best of luck to you moving forward.
Yep, definitely, bro.
So let's jump right into our Monday night matchup here. Chicago at Minnesota. Zach, we have to start with Minnesota because it has just been awesome to watch them each and every week with Josh Dobbs. Last week, they took a loss that was kind of shocking to the Denver Broncos, but still a lot of good things to see there from Josh Dobbs. 221 yards. He went 20 of 32. Got a touchdown. He also rushed 8 times for 21 yards in the touchdown, which I think was pretty notable. Just the Minnesota Vikings have a running quarterback. Haven't had that in a long time. And so that was pretty good. Ty Chandler, I thought, also factored in very well. Listen, Madison, he did great. 18 carries, 81 yards. Thought Ty Chandler, from just standpoint of getting it through the air. He had 10 carries, 73 yards, but then he had 37 yards through the air on 4 catches. So Ty Chandler is a potential option here. We started to talk about it a few weeks ago before Cam Akers tore his Achilles of how Madison wasn't this explosive runner the last bunch of weeks coming into that game. And they started to give Akers a bit more work each week as it went forward. Do you think Ty Chandler is a potential stash here with the potential that he could eventually have a split with Madison?
100%, Brett. And it comes down to that explosive kind of play. We see that on a bunch of different teams right now. I think right away of the AFC North, Baltimore has it with Keaton Mitchell and Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is clearly the lead guy, probably going to get the touchdowns, but Keaton Mitchell can break out an explosive play whenever. The other one, Najee Harris, is going to get those carries at running back, but Jalen Warren has had explosive plays. I think we see a lot of similarities here with this backfield in Minnesota with Ty Chandler as well as Alexander Madison. I'd probably still be starting Madison. It's a good matchup against Chicago. Yes, they've been better, but of course they went up against Detroit last week, and we all know how that ended up for those two running backs in Montgomery and Gibbs. I'm confident in Madison. I agree. Definitely stash Chandler right behind him. I think probably not starting Chandler just yet. I think maybe a couple more weeks, and as he gets more of a workload, you can maybe think about it. As for the wide receivers, Jefferson still a question mark. Looks like probably not this week. Looks like after the bye they're going to come back with him in week 14. So that not great for Jefferson owners. You obviously want him back right away. While he's gone, it's going to be Hawkinson as well as Addison. Of course, KJ Osborne still on the radar, but I feel like it's coming down to the run game plus those two guys in Addison and Hawkinson, Brett.
I agree on all fronts. I also think that I agree on the Jefferson thing. I don't think we're going to see him until week 14. He sort of made that clear on his X profile earlier today, calling out the fans and saying that his health is way more important than our fantasy football games. And so, rest up, big guy, because as far as the dynasty owners, they don't want to come back and then immediately get hurt. Just for the long haul, it's probably better off that he waits the extra week and then comes back, especially as this team is they're still rolling without him. I don't know that you could argue against it. Yeah, they took a loss last week, but it didn't matter. The offense is still what it is. I was not surprised to see Hawkinson start to get back into the target share more and more. He did have 7 targets, 4 catches, 55 yards. I think that we're starting to see him almost become the wide receiver, the tight end one. Just because I think that the Kelsey thing is so interesting, and it's a debate that we'll obviously have as we head into the offseason about, tight end ones and wide receiver ones and running back ones. It seems like the tide's turning between Hawkinson and Kelsey with how those two offenses are rolling.
Yeah, I mean, something to think about. We'll obviously have a lot more time to talk about that, but I mean, as for this matchup, Brett, looking at Chicago, I think you're probably having some confidence in Khalil Herbert after what you saw last week. Of course, it stinks in the end that Devonta Foreman ended up getting that touchdown only on 6 carries. He ended up getting the score. But I feel like if you're a Khalil Herbert owner, you're kind of confident heading into I mean, this matchup, although Javonte didn't have a great week last week, and I think that's also due to Denver focusing a little bit more on the pass. I think probably a flex consideration. I would put Khalil Herbert for now. I wouldn't scream, okay, yeah, you got to put him in just yet. But as time goes on, maybe he's definitely an option for your lineup. And then probably other than that, Brett, it's DJ Moore for me. Yes, Cole Kmet, it's interesting, but it's kind of as tight ends have been throughout this year. It's just so on and off. Only had 3 receptions for 20 yards last week, so you're not insanely confident in it. So kind of could go either way on it, but for me, it's DJ Moore, especially with Fields back. That relationship and that chemistry is on top of it. He ended up finishing as wide receiver 6, gets a touchdown plus the 7 receptions for 96 yards. So that's huge, and you're going to continue to start him.
Yeah, I agree on all of it. More Fields, I even agree on the Komet thing. 3 catches, 20 yards, not a huge output. Still, obviously, like considering better options. Like you probably have better options on your roster. And then Khalil Herbert, yeah, he's a flex consideration. I agree with that one as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so let's just get to this last viewer question here from Dylan. Any ideas after you guys are done thinking through matchups? Was thinking to upgrade running back 2 or wide receiver 3. Zach, I'll pull back up roster. For me, I think it's you probably listen. You look really solid right now at the running back position. I think that having Diggs and Ayuk is going to be really good. Downs and Reed could potentially end up being that flex option, but if I had to try to upgrade, it probably would be that 3rd wide receiver, especially as we start to come playoff time. Like there will be guys that go off. There are a lot of guys out there right now that are buy lows that we've spoken about over the last few weeks. Like there's the potential that you can go package some of your guys and go out and grab a receiver.
Yeah, Brett, I agree with you. I think looking at it, of course, there's way more wide receivers than running backs. We know that as fantasy football owners. Like there's a lot of options out there, and I think like maybe he's got a lot of depth. So maybe packaging that for something a little bit more. I think you're better off getting that at wide receiver because if Hollywood, of course Downs and Reed are there, but I don't know if like consistency wise, I'm going to lock them in as my flex. You really kind of want to solidify that. And I think you can do that with a little bit of the depth that he has. So I would agree with you. Probably wide receiver 3 is the best way to go. Cause you said it, Brett. I think the running backs are really solid and you can upgrade, but I don't know how much you're upgrading there.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think that it's a solid team, though. Listen, it's a solid team, and obviously, you got some time here to make some moves in the next week or so, and obviously, don't overpay for guys. I would say because there is a solid base there for a team. Let's head into our lock of the week here. These are guys that are ranked between, if they're running backs, they are 20th and under, and wide receivers are 30th and under. Guys, you should start in your flex spot. Zach, you're up 7-4 standings, so you get to go pick first. You picked Rashee Rice last week, 8.2 PPR points to my Jordan Addison, who only had 7.4 PPR points. Who are you taking this week?
First off, don't know how I won last week. That was a terrible pick, and it somehow worked. So we're gonna go with it. Hopefully this week's better when it comes to points production. And I'm going with Cortland Sutton. I said it before, and the crazy thing is, it might be one of the toughest matchups on the board. But Cortland Sutton, Brett, might be one of the most like consistent guys in at the wide receiver position over the last couple of weeks or so. Like really, really solid numbers. Let me just look at it from PPR. Just the last 5 weeks, they've had the bye week in week 9, but since then, Kansas City in week 6, 14 points, then 19 points the week after, 10 points, 17 points in week 10, and then 16 points in week 11. A lot of those have to do because of touchdowns, but you're going to go with that. Like if he's fallen into the end zone, why not? And yes, it's a tough matchup against Cleveland, but I mean, they're at home, number 1 in Denver, and number 2, like you're probably going to expect somebody to fall into the end zone. And I'm going to go with the guy that's been in the end zone the last 5 weeks. So, yeah, I think it's Cortland Sutton. I think you got to keep starting him. Even though it's a tough matchup this week, I'm still confident that he'll put up probably over 10 points once again, Brett.
Yeah, it's fair. Listen, my matchup here, I taken Charbonnet, and it's the first time that I've actually taken a running back in this spot. But I think this is where we're going to start to see Zach Charbonnet come into his own. We talked about the matchup, and it is difficult. Listen, he's playing against San Francisco, and so they've only allowed 4 yards per carry to running backs. And so, last week he came in for Kenneth Walker, 47 yards on 15 carries. But I think the big thing here was the 6 of 6 targets for 22 yards. That's sort of a thing that San Francisco hasn't been able to stop from the running backs. It's catching. And so, if Kenneth Walker was in there, I would have thought differently because Kenneth Walker didn't really catch passes. Charbonnet was really good at catching some passes so far this season. I think that's what they're going to sort of lean into a bit here. So I'm taking him as my option just based on the passing game.
Definitely fair, Brett. I think that the workload could definitely be there for Charbonnet this week.
Yep. So now we head into our ones to watch. These are guys who we think will be a waiver target next week. And it was a pretty good week as I get on these picks here. I would go up 9-2 in the standings. And my pick last week was Zach Charbonnet, who seems to be the top waiver ad for this week. So, got a week ahead jump on this. And so, Zach, you picked Rico Dowdle. Also a good solid pick. I think that, he only had 4 PPR points, but it's another guy that you should at least take a look at as Tony Pollard's up-down season continues. So, I'll take the first pick here with Charbonnet getting 12.9. I'm taking Josh Dobbs. Or Josh Dobbs. I'm taking Josh Downs. Josh Dobbs would be a pretty good pick, but I will take Josh Downs here. And it's based on the matchup. Listen, I think that Josh Downs, when he first started to come into his own, it really came after Anthony Richardson went down, and we saw all of a sudden this camaraderie with Gardner Minshew. It was insane to watch because he just kind of went off. And then all of a sudden, he has his last 2 weeks are duds. 2 points followed by 6 points. Gets dropped in a ton of leagues. He's now out there in like 55% of leagues in standard ESPN leagues. And so that's a guy I'm going out and I'm getting back because I think that going up against the Buccaneers, they've surrendered the 10th most PPR points per target to slot receivers. And that's the thing that I really sets him apart because he's the slot receiver. He's going to get a large target share heading into this week. I think he's going to up his value back, reclaim that confidence with Gardner Minshew, and be, a threat for the last couple weeks here as we approach the regular season in fantasy.
Interesting one, Brett. I think it's going to end up being a really big guy to come in and definitely with Gardner Minshew, we've seen that chemistry in the past. So definitely a guy to keep on the radar and definitely pick him up in a lot of leagues. For me, Brett, haven't told you about this one yet. And it's a guy that we actually talked about today because he's just been so solid. Especially last week had a really solid game. It's Odell Beckham Jr. He's owned in 30% of leagues right now. The biggest thing for me is Mark Andrews is out. Mark Andrews is out, and Lamar is looking for another option. Yes, he has Zay Flowers, and he's obviously going to take that step up. Is it going to be Isaiah Likely? It could be, but I think it's going to end up being Odell because they finally have found like his kind of role in this offense and where they want him to be. Of course, they really increased it last week and got him in good areas. So I think they're going to keep going back to that. Because the other thing is the matchup this week. I think he's going to end up having another solid game. I I don't know if I would start him right away. Like, yeah, he could be a flex option this week, definitely. But a guy to watch for the future, because he's going up against the second worst passing defense in the NFL in the Chargers this week. So could end up having a good output in the end.
Just think that his target share over the last bunch of weeks has gone up and up and up. Now you take Mark Andrews out of the equation, and all of a sudden Lamar has to try to find a guy that he trusts. And I think that's the big thing, is trust. And Odell seems to be the guy that he's been trusting just as much as Zay Flowers. And so I agree with the pick. We've seen in this last 3 weeks where he's had double-digit fantasy points in each last week. And so, yeah, it's a solid pick. I think that Odell is starting to turn the corner a little bit from what it was at the beginning of the season. I think that it is the guy that you should go out and add, definitely.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so any last thoughts here as we head into our Thanksgiving weekend of football here?
I hope that Sam Laporta, you become once again my favorite player in the NFL and my favorite tight end, of course. I need a big game this week. That's what I'm hoping for, Brett.
I'm actually going out on a limb here. I'm rooting for Tommy DeVito here. I think that standing him there in my Superflex spot, it's going to be kind of interesting to see now what this Giants offense looks like going forward after what was a good week against the league's worst defense. And so I'm going to be praying there for Tommy D to get it done here in the Thanksgiving week 12. But make sure that you go check us out on YouTube, wherever your podcast, and subscribe to us and give us the thumbs up. We will catch you guys next week. Darkest before the dawn, we shall rise yet again. Signing off, Zach Malamud and Brett Malamud on the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We will catch you next week.